This is Boomer Life on CL 650.
When you're broke, go and get a loan. Take out another mortgage on your home. Consolidate so you can afford to go and spend some more when you get bored. All we ever want is more.
Well, there you go. Who knew that Shania Twain could rap? Holy cow, and about money, no less. Welcome back to Boomer Life. Sterling Fox with you, joined in studio by Brett Luckin. Mr. Luckin is a trustee with Abakhan and Associates, trustees in bankruptcy and proposal administrators with offices all over our province. And Brett spends a lot of time on the highways of our province.
Yes, I do.
Speaking to people with money problems all over British Columbia.
I do. In fact, other than those offices, those central areas, I meet people in everything from a Starbucks to a Tim Hortons, the worst place I ever went to. No, in fact, I won't say. But there are some places on the highway where you don't want to eat lunch. Trust me.
No matter how broke you are.
No matter how broke you are. I won't use the name. But yes, I will meet people whenever, within reason, whenever, wherever, if they need someone
and
like
that's
me.
such a smart thing, because you talked about this right at the beginning of the program. There's a stigma. There's a fear. All sorts of negative emotions surround having money problems, Brett. Being in debt is never any fun. Having all those awful people hounding you every day of your life for money that you spent 5 years ago, and they're still coming after you. I mean, it is no fun. But I think the fact that you're a flexible person who doesn't insist that someone come into the office and have that important. You're a reasonable guy. You're a very down-to-earth kind of guy who's been through the mill yourself as a businessman and entrepreneur. And you've seen the good days and the bad days.
I have seen both sides of the coin, and I completely understand. And I also understand that people, and I think generally speaking, many trustees do, but in particular at Abakhan, what we try to do is make ourselves available. So I will do a telephone consult at 7 or 8 o'clock at night if that's the only time someone can do it.
Sure.
I'm currently this weekend, I'm driving when I drive to the Okanagan, I'm driving down to Soyuz to see someone down there because they don't have a motor vehicle and they're not able to get anyone to give them a lift to Penticton or Vernon or Kelowna. Mm-hmm. So as a result, I'm going to her. So those I see people late at night. I see people sometimes super early in the morning. It's whatever you need, because at the end of the day, this kind of situation very often needs immediate help.
Right.
A garnishment of bank accounts, a garnishment of wages. It's immediate. It's an instantaneous solution.
And one of the reasons I assume, Brett, that people are seeing you at these off hours is because they're still working. They're still struggling somehow to keep their heads above water. Yeah. Even though it's not a lot of fun these days, they still recognize the need at all times to keep that cash flow going.
Yes, and they don't want to have the kind of conversation they're going to need to have with someone like me in an office environment.
Right.
They want to be able to go home where they can feel that they can talk openly and discuss it, and that means maybe 8 o'clock at night is the only time they can speak.
Sure. Let's talk about that unspeakable part of our conversation, Mr. Luckin. Let's talk about the final option available to people with huge debt problems, and that is bankruptcy.
Right.
So what exactly, first of all, Brett, is bankruptcy?
Bankruptcy is not repaying your debt anymore. There's no longer a promise to make a repayment of debt. And what I would do is I'd be sitting down with someone. I'd figure out that a consumer proposal at, let's say, $500 a month, to use that, is what they're going to need to be able to pay for the next 60 months.
Okay.
And looking at the income and expense, and most people know immediately that they can or can't afford that amount of money. Mm-hmm. It's immediately obvious that they can't make that payment. And if they can't do that, they now either go back to option one, which is do nothing and wait for the garnishments to happen, mm-hmm. or they actually file a bankruptcy and start the clock on resolving that debt, so that there is now a given date in the future where this debt is going to be gone and they can move on with their lives. And that's what's so important. Bankruptcy then in those situations.
Do a lot of people come to you and your colleagues at Abakhan and Associates, though, Brett? Do a lot of people come expecting the worst? Well, I've been putting this off because I know the only reason I'm here is because I have to go bankrupt. And you sit there and look at their circumstances, have a chat with them, and go, well, maybe not. Maybe not.
Absolutely.
Does that happen? Do most people expect they have to go bankrupt? Turns out they don't.
Often. Oh, it's so often. I will sit with someone and look at their income and look at the assets that they own and look at their debt and say, you don't have to go bankrupt. Have you considered that a consumer proposal of $325 a month would get you out of this in less than 5 years, potentially? Or at maximum 5 years? And they go, no, I didn't realize that. I thought bankruptcy was my only option.
And is that simply because most of us don't have a clue what a consumer proposal is?
It is, and how a consumer proposal is calculated. It's that, what is that discounted percentage? How do I get 25 cents on the dollar as what the creditors of somebody would agree to?
Right.
And I think, and that's the key, because in fact, in a consumer proposal, what a trustee is doing is figuring out, and this is the key to the whole equation, what a trustee is doing is saying, if your creditor said no to your consumer proposal, your only fundamental option is a bankruptcy.
Right.
So what your trustee in bankruptcy is doing is saying, okay, well then what would they get if you went bankrupt? And if they would get 10 cents on the dollar or 5 cents on a dollar out of you, then an offer of 25 or 30 cents on the dollar is now suddenly completely viable.
Sure.
And it's something that they would say, well, of course we're going to say yes to that. In many cases, not in many, in fact, I can tell you that 95 to 99% of cases they do. They say yes.
Brett, when you go bankrupt, do you lose your home? Do you lose your car? Do you lose your boat? Do you lose the RV? Does your whole life literally go away?
No, and in fact, that is a myth. That's a misunderstanding of how bankruptcy works. The truth of the matter is that in many cases it doesn't affect your house at all. It doesn't affect your car at all. These are all secured assets, and the primary let's say institution that cares whether or not you make your payments on your house or your car is in fact the bank,
right,
who originally loaned you the money to
sure.
purchase those things.
Right. Now the boat and the RV, the so-called luxury items, may have they would definitely already be in a different category than house and car.
They are not what's termed exempt.
Okay.
They are completely non-exempt. An exemption, really, what that means in a bankruptcy, if something is exempt or could be a partially exempt, is when the federal and provincial governments sat down and figure out and say to themselves, if you're bankrupt, we're not going to strip you of everything you own. You need knives and forks to eat. You need tables and chairs to sit on when you go home.
Yes.
And so, as an example, in BC, you're allowed to keep up to $4,000 per individual in furniture and household fittings.
Right.
And that means in a couple, that's $8,000. And I can tell you there aren't many households with auction realizable value of $8,000 in home furnishings and goodies. You may like that couch, but you ain't
not going to get much in an auction.
You're not going to get much for it, right?
Right.
So you do not see trustees in bankruptcy going to your home and counting how many pairs of shoes you have, or
right,
T-shirts, or knives and forks.
Right.
So practically speaking, very often a bankruptcy doesn't touch your home life whatsoever. If you collect Persian carpets, or you're one of those ladies who have 25 different Chanel bags, you may have an issue there, and we may be asking you to purchase those items back from us in a bankruptcy. But your average person, your average man in the street, he's not affected at all. So when you look at things such as homes and cars, most motor vehicles these days are worth less than what you owe the bank.
But is that why so many people procrastinate, Brett? They don't want to have that awful conversation with a professional like yourself
because
they're afraid,
yes,
if I sit down with a trustee, then somebody will know my address, and somebody will have a pipeline to me and be able to take away all the stuff that I don't want to lose. So rather than risk that, I'm not going to do anything.
Yes, and that's a mistake. In fact, consultations with a professional like me, the first consultation, and often many of them, are number one, free. Okay. I don't charge. I often have people say, okay, well, what's it going to cost me after I've spent 45 minutes on the phone with them or sat across the table with them for an hour in a restaurant, in a Tim Hortons or something? And I say, no, this is free. What I'm saying to you is free. The only way that a trustee in bankruptcy or the administrator of your consumer proposal, which is the role I have, gets paid is if you file with me.
Right.
So that's number one. You don't pay me anything to listen to what I have to tell you as a expert. I put that in inverted commas. That's number one. Number two is anything you tell me initially is completely confidential. You need to understand that ultimately, if you were to file with me or any trustee, there is a whole bunch of information which is going to get disclosed to your creditors, such as what you own.
But a conversation over a cup of coffee is entirely private.
Is entirely private. So what you speak to me, you tell me a whole lot of stuff, I'm going to feed back to you what I think the best options available to you are.
Right.
Ultimately, if you were to file with me or file with another trustee, there is information you're going to be disclosing which is going to be out there and be available to your creditors.
Well, we need to take a quick break here, but what percentage of people who go to you and your colleagues expecting the bankruptcy option to be described as the only one available to them, what percentage of people end up filing a proposal instead?
I can tell you, as an example, simple as that throughout Canada, throughout BC, we are looking at it's approximately 50-50, although it definitely leans now more towards proposals.
Interesting. Okay.
So predominantly
as more and more people learn about them.
Yes. And with Abakhan and Associates, in fact, we have a 60-40 split, almost exactly down to the wire in terms of percentages. So people who call us, many of whom think that bankruptcy is the only option,
right.
Actually 60% of those people end up filing a proposal.
As we were mentioning at the very beginning of this program, friends, we're talking about solutions to debt problems and every reason to believe that there is hope for your debt problems, and professionals like our guest Brett Luckin and his colleagues at Abakhan and Associates available to help you. And gosh, he's even going to buy the first cup of coffee.
He does.
There you go. Abakhan, by the way, and Associates is online at abakhan.com, and that's spelled ABAKHAN.com. And we're back with more on Boomer Life after this.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.